Aries 13, an unsuccessful bomb explosion. This is about social protest. We live in a world where the powers that be are not really respected people. We don't have a lot of faith in the processes of government and so on. Ever has it been so throughout the ages? It's the nature of things. And it is also the nature of things to protest against authority that you just can't absorb. You can't put up with it. And babies and young children particularly are well aware that parental responsibilities are being overindulged. Their parents make them do things which aren't fair. And even if they're not aware of it, they feel it. They don't want to eat up that last bit of meat. They want a biscuit or some sweet. And the parent says, you must eat your meat. Fair enough, that's reasonable, responsible behavior by the parent. But the parent so often is unconsciously dumping their stuff on the kid. And one way or another, the kids protest, sometimes validly, sometimes not. Well, we don't grow out of that. We also want to protest against inappropriate authority. And if we do that by throwing a bomb at a government official, it's it's just petulant, silly behavior, destructive. There's nothing in it of love or of truth. It's emotional outbursts. And any such behavior within us, just to rant at an authority figure or try and bring them down by a process which is not loving or forgiving or responsible, any protest of that kind will fail. And we have to just deal with whatever feelings that we've got some other way. We're going to have those feelings, though. All of us want to rebel against inappropriate authority. That's how it is. You know, we're not going to put up with being bullied and being cheated. It won't do. And we're discussing in this Aries 13 expression the balance between the extent to which we feel the need for freedom of this authority on the one hand, and the extent to which we feel the responsibility of being a mature member of our community, our society, on the other. Because if we are mature in our social protest, we don't throw bombs. And yet, sometimes we feel that if we don't throw bombs, we can't have freedom. Now, this is a real question of our times. There is an increase nowadays in social protest and violent expression of that. And on the one hand, violence we speak against. No, violence is wrong. And on the other hand, we kind of feel frustrated because without violence, nothing seems to happen. The proper processes of law and order and democracy don't seem to do the job. We've still got those people in power, the elite, that have not our best interests at heart. They govern things and do horrible things in the name of control. So how do we square this circle? How can we usurp the tyrants who've distorted their responsibilities in power? On the one hand, we have to do that. We really must do that. But on the other, how? How can we do that without bombs? The point is that bombs don't work. They might have an effect in the short term. Certain revolutions have occurred and they seem to take hold. Well, let's take the big one in 1919, I think, when the Soviets were ousted. Sorry, the Tsar was ousted by the Soviets. And it seemed like that Soviet rebellion worked because the Tsarist aristocracy was kicked out. But what happened? You know, about a century later, there is no idea of that rebellion having worked in the long term. It's the same with the French Rebellion. The French Rebellion was meant to oust the aristocracy and replace it with democratic processes. And to some extent it did that, but Napoleon was bit of a tyrant himself. And the idea of dealing with any problem with violence is not only inelegant and unbeautiful, it's just, it fails. So violence is not a moral question, it's a question of practicality. It just doesn't work. However, people have fears. People fear the oppression of an unjust authority. And how would you treat a toddler who's having a tantrum? How would you deal with that? You know, you can smack them and send them to bed without any supper if you like, but that won't deal with the problem. You'll have the same problem tomorrow. What do you do with that fractious child? Because that's what we have to do with these people that want to throw bombs against the government. We have to find another way. And what we perhaps can understand is that this feeling of rebelliousness, violent rebelliousness, is a valid feeling. It is born out of perceived injustice. The feeling itself has to be heard. Now, for somebody to come at you with their violent frustration being dumped, it's very difficult to deal with. And there is only one safe place to be when that happens, and that's quietly within the heart. If your heart is strong enough, deep enough, gentle enough, those violent outbursts don't damage you, don't touch you. It just goes right through. If there is no violence within you, then whatever violence is thrown at you has nothing to stick in, nothing to stick on. It just can't get you. And so the safest place to be is deep within a peaceful heart. And we see here that non-violent protests, such as Mahatma Gandhi and such as Jesus Christ, these kind of figures which demonstrate by their way of being that they have found at least the philosophy of peace, and perhaps even the practice of it. And the Buddha is the same thing, a very peaceful person. We don't really get a lot of spiritual leaders who are warmongering. There are examples in history, but most spiritual teachings teach that we have to deepen our sense of peace, tranquility, unassailability, and this is found within a deep and loving heart. And in that state of being, forgiveness bubbles up. It's like with a child. If a child is throwing a tantrum, a good mother isn't judgmental, isn't harsh, or even overly controlling. There must be some control, but not overmuch. And there is this sense of understanding. I can see why you're in a bad mood. You're hungry, or you want to play with this and it's dangerous for you, so I've stopped, or whatever. You don't understand the implications of what you're trying to do. The good mother understands that the appropriate way to deal with this fractious energy is through understanding and forgiveness and a heart which is deep and pure.